Big 12 matchups and then some. And coming up, we're going to review my picks for last week, which was a horror show. Yeah, I did pretty bad. But I'm going to face the music, and I'm going to take it like a man. We're going to come back this week with some better picks, though. Believe me. Before we get into this week's picks and reviewing last week's, we've got to talk a little bit about bowl eligibility for the Big 12. If you don't know, 8 teams from the Big 12 conference, at least 8, will go to bowl games, assuming that you can get 8 to bowl eligibility. You have to win at least 6 games to get to bowl eligibility. So far, the Big 12 has 7 teams who have hit bowl eligibility. OU, OSU, as well as Baylor, Nebraska, and Missouri. And this past week, both Texas A&M and Kansas State got to that magical 6-win plateau. They're now bowl eligible. Remember, being bowl eligible doesn't guarantee you a bowl bid. It just means that you're considered for a bowl game. Now, here's the interesting subject, okay? This is why I brought all this up. There are 3 weeks left to go, and Texas, as well as Iowa State, as well as Texas Tech, are going to have a shot at getting to bowl eligibility. Yes, Texas, as bad as they've been this season, and even though they're 4-5 right now, are going to have a shot at getting to 6 wins. For Iowa State, first of all, we'll talk about them. They need to win at Colorado. It's that simple. Right now, Iowa State's 5-5. They go to Colorado, and then their final game is at home against Missouri, and that's it for the Cyclones. So if they can win at Colorado, it takes all the pressure off of them entering the Missouri game at home after that. So Paul Rhodes, their team got to a bowl game last year. They have a shot getting to one this year. Texas Tech, they're at 5-4 right now. It's going to be tough for them to get a win this week because they're playing at Oklahoma, who never loses at home. But the last 2 games present opportunities. Home games against Weber State and against Houston. Houston, by the way, one of the bigger disappointments, primarily because Case Keenum, he's been out for the year, but also that team just hadn't lived up to the expectations that were bestowed upon them. They're a 500 ball club, or pretty close. Texas Tech at home should be able to win that game. So you figure Texas Tech, worst case scenario, should be 7-5. They've been bowl eligible every year, by the way, since the Big 12 started play. No other Big 12 team can make that claim. And then you have the Texas Longhorns, who right now are at 4-5. Beating Oklahoma State this week is going to be a difficult chore. I don't see them doing it. They do get Florida Atlantic at home the following week. They should win that game. And then it'll all boil down to Thanksgiving night against A&M. Not for a shot at winning the Big 12, not for a shot to be the best team in Texas. Those are lost causes for the Longhorns, but a chance to get to 6-6 in bowl eligibility, assuming that you can't beat OSU but can beat Florida Atlantic. So Texas Tech, I'll promise you this much, if they get to 6 wins, they will go to a bowl game, and they'll get precedence over any other borderline team in the conference, because the one thing that bowls really look at, they look at big name value, TV ratings, which Texas will generate, and they also look at how many fans you can bring to a bowl game, because that's ticket sales increase, that's more money for your bowl game. Texas fits that bill. So you might say to yourself, okay, what happens if you have more than 8 teams get to bowl eligibility? Does that mean that more than 8 teams will go to a bowl from the Big 12? The answer, it's a possibility. For sure, 8 will go. But if another conference can't get enough teams to bowl eligibility, that's where a 9th squad from the Big 12 could get an invite. That's very important to remember. More than likely, 10 teams from one conference isn't going to happen, but I could see 9 getting in. So I do think if it comes down to a borderline decision, and I think it's going to, if you get more than 8 teams from the Big 12, I think Texas, if they get to 6 wins, they're going to get a bowl bid just because of the name and just because of how much money they can bring to the bowl game, especially if it's a bowl game that's pretty close in proximity to where the fans only have to drive and not fly. So I think Texas, they can win 2 of their last 3. They will get a bowl bid, assuming that they accept the bowl bid. They can always deny it, but that usually isn't the case unless you're Notre Dame and expect to play in bigger bowl games than you deserve to. Just an editorial there, by the way. So that's my thoughts on bowl eligibility for Big 12 teams. Now, let's go ahead and highlight last week's picks, which were a horror show for me. Wow. Obviously, the worst week I've ever had of picking in my entire life. 2-8 against the spread. And if it weren't for Oklahoma State's cover against Baylor and Stanford's cover over Arizona, I would have gone winless for the week. Yeah, so much for dominance, right? Wrong. By the way, the coin kicked my tail. 6-4 against the spread was the coin, and the coin now has drawn even with me. My 4-game lead has been erased. The coin and I are dead tied entering the final 4 weeks of the season. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is time now. Time for my weekly picks, and hopefully you didn't take any of my picks to the bank last week because you don't have a bank. If you did that, you lost big. Hopefully this week, though, we get the job done. Let's focus on the present now, not the past. Oklahoma State at Texas. How the times have changed. OSU in the driver's seat in the Big 12 South. Texas just trying to get to bowl eligibility. They have to win 2 of their last 3 to do it. I don't see it happening this week. Too many problems for Texas to even run down the list, but the biggest problem, or one of the biggest problems I should say, is at quarterback play with Garrett Gilbert. He's been an interception machine. I think he threw 5 last week against Kansas State. OSU's offense in the meantime clicking on all cylinders. I look for them to finally break the schneid against Texas and win in Austin and to cover that 5.5. So give me OSU minus the 5.5. If the coin lands on heads, likes the favorite. Tails, it's going to go with the underdog. The coin is going to take Oklahoma State as well. Texas A&M at Baylor. You would think this would be a trap game for the Aggies because of the fact they came off a big win over the Sooners, and Baylor came off one of their worst performances of the year, getting shellacked at Oklahoma State. Baylor comes back home, but the bottom line is Baylor, it's not a real home field advantage. Texas A&M is playing better ball now than they did in September, and Ryan Tannehill, the quarterback's why. So I look for A&M to cover the spread and to win by at least 3. So give me A&M minus the 3. The coin likes Baylor. Kansas is at Nebraska. 35 points. That is the spread. Wow, rarely do you see a point spread that high for a conference game anywhere, especially the Big 12. Turner Gill, who led those Nebraska teams in the early 80s to dominance, now returns to Nebraska, but this time against them as Kansas's head coach, and it will be a beatdown big time in Lincoln. However, I think 35 points is too many. The spread might get to 35, but Nebraska, I think, pulls their second and third team and puts them on the field. I think Kansas can score some points late and get a backdoor cover. I'll look for Nebraska to win big, but 35 is too big. Give me Kansas plus the 35 in the backdoor cover special, while the coin is going to take Kansas as well. Iowa State at Colorado. Boy, talking about teams going in opposite directions. Even though Iowa State lost last week, they had guts going for 2, didn't convert, but played to win against Nebraska. Their mentality is right for a winner. Paul Rhodes, another great job. Iowa State needs one more win to get to bowl eligibility, as we mentioned earlier. Colorado just fired Dan Hawkins, no shock at all. And the Buffaloes are without direction, and it doesn't matter if Colorado is behind in the game or if they're winning big, as we found out last week against Kansas. They're going to find ways to lose games. It's a small spread. I'll look for Iowa State to take care of Colorado in Boulder. So give me Iowa State minus 2.5. The coin likes Iowa State as well. And then you have Kansas State at Missouri. For Mizzou, it's bounce back time. They were humiliated last week by Texas Tech. Kansas State, big win over Texas a week ago. I look for Mizzou to win this game. Kansas State's already at bowl eligibility. Missouri needs to win to get some pride back. I look for the Tigers at home to cover the 12.5 points. The coin is going to take Kansas State. Let's go down to non-Big 12 games. We're going to begin with Ohio State at home against Penn State. Ohio State hasn't been talked about much this year, and they've only lost 1 ball game. Penn State came off a win last week, got Joe Pa his 400th coaching victory in his career. But this is a mismatch. Ohio State too dominant up front, too much Terrell Pryor. I look for Ohio State to win in a laugher over Penn State. Ohio State minus the 18. The coin is going to take Ohio State. Georgia is at Auburn. The Bulldogs. It's going to be close for them as far as getting to a bowl game. Can Mark Richt stay out of the hot seat? Well, if they finish 5-7 this year, it's going to be hard for him to stay out of that hot seat. A win over Auburn could save his job. I'll look for Georgia to play tough in this ball game. Auburn has a lot of distractions right now because of all the news about Cam Newton. Did he get paid? Did his father get paid for coming to Auburn? It's a lot of messy junk right now. I look for Auburn in this game to win, but the 7.5 points, because of everything we've heard off the field, maybe too big of a distraction for Auburn to be at their best. So Georgia plus the 7.5 points, while the coin is going to take Auburn. USC at Arizona. The Trojans, the former kings of the Pac-10, still has a shot though at a at a good season record-wise. Arizona, though, at home, the offense is playing well. They lost last week, but there's no shame in losing to Stanford. Stanford's a pretty good squad. I look for Arizona with that 4-point margin to take advantage of USC's poor defense. Arizona minus the 4. The coin's going to take Arizona as well. And two other games to highlight. The SEC East Championship hanging in the balance. The winner of this game represents the East in the SEC title game, South Carolina at Florida. The old ball coach Spurrier going back to his hunting grounds, the Swamp, to take on Urban Meyer and the Gators. I like the way Florida played against Georgia in that win 2 weeks ago. They just blew out Vanderbilt. I know Vanderbilt stinks, but Florida had no letdown in that game. So Florida, maybe they found some things out. I look for them to win, and I look for them to cover the 6.5 points and to represent the East in the championship game. So give me Florida minus a 6.5. The coin is going to take Florida. The coin and I are nearly identical on every pick, by the way, if you haven't been keeping up. And then finally, #1 team in the country, the undefeated Oregon Ducks. Could be a trap this week. Could be trouble. They're playing at Cal. Cal on the road is bad, but on the other hand, Cal at home, different team. I'm not saying Cal's going to pull off the upset, but I do think that the 20-point spread you're giving Oregon is too many points. So I'll look for Cal to make it interesting. Give me Cal plus the 20, while the coin is going to take Oregon. So as far as the coin and I've got to look back at this on the tape. We matched on nearly every single game. Wow. So those are my picks for the week. What were yours? We'll highlight those picks next week, and hopefully I can avoid the 2-8 record that I had just a week ago. We'll see you next time for another edition of the Big 12 Matchups and then some.